Right, welcome to the last session. We have two presenters, again 30 minutes, 20 minutes of presentation and 10 minutes of interaction. Zelezeck, we are in your hands.
Okay, good afternoon everybody. Mine is a PhD thesis. The working title is Endogeneity and Economic Development Towards a New Theory of Entrepreneurship. I just thought that before I take you through, to quickly present three concepts, three ideas that are really at the core of my topic. It's inductive, it's grounded, and iterative. Why did I think I should say that? Because I think there are at least now two, what one could consider as two basic entry points into research. The first one will consist in having well-crafted questions, predefining to a large extent the research, and then conducting it. The second one will be defining the questions themselves in the process of the research. I take an example. If I want to study, for example, school drops out, one way I could do that, which I will describe as the deductive approach, could be for me to start reading the library about the process and formulate questions which I take to the field. The second way could be, which is the logic that usually apply in grounded theory type of research, could be for me to start directly interviewing people who have dropped out from school, record the transcript from them, and when I get to the house in the evening, I begin to ask which questions are this transcript raising. That's the second approach to research. And I think at least since 1967, that approach has gained legitimacy and authority in education as well. My thesis is situated within that second approach. And you will see when I go along what I've thought it necessary to make that point. The aim of the objective is to construct a theory of entrepreneurship that is grounded in the experiences of African most reputed entrepreneurial communities. That's the aim, to construct a theory. The data which I use to construct that theory are the experiences of communities across the continent that are the most reputed entrepreneurially. The methodology is meta-synthesis. I'll come back to that when I go. This is the chapterization, 7 chapters. This is where the thesis started. In the conventional model, I will first do this before I get here. But in the model that I'm doing, I never did this. I started here. And that's why you see the 2 arrows, because it's this informing the way here and informing the way there. So I started directly the research, doing coding, trying to ask which questions is this phenomenon raising. And of course, one of the first thing in my this is indeed the introduction. This is the literature review chapter. This is the methodology chapter. This is the findings. This is discussion of findings. This is a chapter which I have thought appropriate to introduce because of the importance of the subject. A focused discussion on further research and action around entrepreneurship, and that's the conclusion. So, being situated here, the first question which I'm concerned with is, of course, determining what are the communities I'm talking about. Because I say I want to build a theory from the experiences of those communities. These are the communities I discovered from across the continent. For me to be able to build this list, I had to basically, it's not interview, I have to put questionnaire to 5 people per country on the 49 countries of the continent. And it was not a process of discovering the communities. It was a process of just noticing that there is such a community that exists, because it is believed like that by common knowledge, because preliminary work has been done on those communities. So these are the communities that I found, the 23 communities. Initially, when I started thinking of it, before having the entire continental perspective, I only knew of 3, the Bamilekes, the Igbos, and the Somalis. So this is what the research gave me. The second step after I've built this list was now to retrieve all the case studies that has been produced on the phenomenon of entrepreneurship of these communities, exhaustively. So retrieving all the case studies that has been produced in this phenomenon. This is just a map to give you a bit of an approach how the communities are presented in the African continent. Now, the aim is to use the case studies as data. So in a way, if you want to think about it in the terms of preliminary research, the case studies are for me the equivalent of transcript when you go and interview people. When you go and interview people, you make transcripts and come back and you analyze those transcripts. I'm analyzing the case studies as if I had the interview of the author. So that from that perspective, this of course generated hundreds of sources. For example, the Igbos themselves, on the phenomenon of Igbo entrepreneurship, there's more than 25 sources. On the Bamileke, it goes close to 20. On the Kikuyus, and so on and so forth. So I had to find, because of in qualitative research, you have to have a sample that is manageable enough to analyze. So for purely practical reasons, I had to sample. And that's why I invoked the concept of ideational sampling. That is kind of a reduced form of theoretical sampling. And I borrowed that concept from Glaser and Strauss in their book Status Passage, to be able to find from these hundreds of sources that I've met from here, the one which I want to use as data. Meta-analysis. Meta-analysis basically is the putting together of findings from past published studies on one phenomenon. For example, I may want to put together the findings that has been published, or all the findings that have been published, for example, on the experience of living with HIV. Then I collect all the qualitative studies that have been produced. I put together their findings, and that's a meta-synthesis. That's the broader method which I'm using. Within meta-synthesis, you have to determine which methodology you're using. That's what Morongwa referred to as the method of analysis. There are many in meta-synthesis. One is grounded formal theory that was articulated by Glaser and Strauss around how to use the findings of preliminary research preliminary grounded theory research to build a higher level theory. So you're moving up in terms of conceptualization. And the other one is meta-ethnographies. The process of selecting the method of analysis is a function of what you have. There are two characteristics that must guide you are selecting the method of analysis. One is the type of studies that you have at the entry level and the type of product that you want to produce. So grounded formal theory, for example, work best when you are the initial theories are grounded theories themselves. But meta-ethnography was produced specifically when your initial studies are ethnographies. And I could only decide this after I've collected the studies and discovered that they were all ethnographic accounts. That the case studies on these communities were all ethnographic, mostly ethnographic account. That's how meta-ethnography therefore appear as the method, the most appropriate method which I'm going to use to define it. Now in meta-ethnography you have three possible products that you can produce. One is what Noblis and R called a reciprocal translation, when the studies are saying the same thing, when they are similar. When the studies refute each other, you do what we call refutational translation. When you hope to develop something higher from this, than any of the studies is saying, is called line of argument synthesis. And that's what I'm planning to do. Now the method through which you do line of argument synthesis, according to what Noblis proposes, is either what you call clinical inferences, or you use grounded theory techniques. And I'm using grounded theory techniques to arrive at the theory. So that's, in a nutshell, is the method. Coming back to the idea of the transversal being situated here and moving across. Only after a while am I now able to make this 10 statements about chapter 2. And each of the things here have to gain its right of entrance in the thesis. It doesn't just come there. To give an example, I would not just discuss Schumpeter simply because I'm talking of entrepreneurship. There must be, in the very instances that I'm studying, a reason that calls for me to include him. I exclude him if it's not relevant. So it's only at that level that I'm able to make this 10 statements, which when I read them, you will see a bit of logic and how it retrospectively construct the context of the thesis. For example, the first statement which I made, which is basically the logic in which I'm writing chapter 2 now. But this is a temporary design. And as I progress in the analysis in chapter 3, nothing stops me from changing it completely if it becomes irrelevant as the process. This is situated basically at the junction of my reading of the literature and what I'm finding in the research. So the first statement is that literature review is not a mechanical act. It is the construction of the reviewer grounded on published works. And I felt I should say that because most of literature reviews tend to be done mechanically. Just an act, that's something that you have to quickly do and move to the research. Entrepreneurship is the child of development discourses in Africa. That's the second statement. Although development has been subjected to ordering, entrepreneurship has not. There's been substantive work produced on the impact of ordering on development, which has allowed us to better understand the concept of development. I think Prof has published also a lot in that direction, interrogating development through the lens of ordering. That hasn't happened with entrepreneurship, which is a subset of development. Ordering is, I define ordering, engaging the literature on ordering and presenting it, and showing how one of the key characteristics of ordering is a deductive logic to research, because you import concept, you import point of views, you import viewpoints, frames of reference from elsewhere, and apply it on the reality of the order, and therefore that tends to give you a distorted view of the order. So the fifth statement is that looking at the literature on African entrepreneurship through the lens of ordering, you see two discourses directly appearing. One is a dominant discourse that is powered by the truth of imported theoretical concept. And the second one is a marginal discourse that is powered by the truth of local realities. So it becomes very clear by the time you apply the lens of ordering to that, to all the literature that has been published on African entrepreneurship. But of course, like with all matters of categorizing, the boundaries are not that fixed. You find certain element of the first discourse in the second, and there are gray areas in the two. So each discourses are explored. I explore each of the discourses. Then I enter into the dominant discourse. That's the eighth statement, in which I'm able to see that the discourse is based on paradigm, the dominant discourse. And in this, my discussion of the dominant discourse is largely based on the work of Nick Moore, which shows that the whole literature on entrepreneurship in developing countries can be summed up in 4 paradigms. And those paradigms are the social barrier paradigm, inspired by the work of Weber, the Marxist paradigm, economic dependency, political dependency, and then the impact that it has on entrepreneurs. That's Karl Marx, of course. The neoliberal paradigm of Adam Smith, which is that the state necessarily have a negative role in the economy. And there is the latest one, which is the new economy sociology, social capital, by Granovetter and Alexandre Portes, for example. So this, I articulate my discussion in this chapter around that conceptualization, that systematic literature review that Nick Moore has done already. And it enables me to see that it is paradigm-centric, that the paradigm discussed, I therefore discuss the paradigm from the African usages back to their European origins. So I do not start there. I start how they applied in the African context and show where they came from initially. So it's a kind of a regressive type of moving there. Then I look at the consequences of those paradigms in our understanding of African entrepreneurship. This is all literature. This is not the research yet. So, and then I look at what an interesting view, which I again find in Moore's book, in Moore's article, is the minority view in all of this within Europe itself. Because although the 5 paradigms have been dominant in Europe, there's been a minority view in Europe as well. So I explore that minority view, and likely we'll discuss it in the discussion chapter about how that minority view has some similarities with the the experience elsewhere in the world. Then I look at the marginal discourse, In the marginal discourse, I see that it takes two expressions. The first is a few works of a general characteristic which take to present generally African entrepreneurship. And one good example of that is Diomande's work, where he's studying entrepreneurship in the context of resource scarcity, and even articulating how that can be of interest to the American context, where resource companies seem to be over-resourced, and that is also creating its problems. And then the second arm of the marginal discourse is of course the hundreds of case studies that have been produced on our communities. That's the second arm. So that is my concern. My concern is with those case studies. What I see as lacking in those case studies is what I call, in some of them, analytical interrupters. That is, they remain descriptive. What I also see as lacking is that, of course, they are inherently limited by how far you can go when you build theory from a single case study. And the last one is the need. This is the instrumental, the kind of instrumentalist reason why metasynthesis studies are done, is that there's a proliferation of qualitative research in the field, in an area, which is not adding up to anything, and that is waste of energy. So you want to put that together so that you provide higher level understanding that can be used. For example, in the case of our community, their greatest failings is that despite the hundreds of cases, they haven't put forward a strong and compelling theory that could inform how future research on entrepreneurship in Africa is done. So that is the structure currently, a likely structure of chapter 2, as the process in chapter 3 is unfolding. Now, how do I build the theory? Metaethnography says I have to build a matrix like this, where reading my studies as transcript from interviews, the same way I code them and identify the core categories that represent them. The core categories are here. Then in each of these studies, metaethnography introduce what they call metaphors. Metaphors are devices to be able to render large text in reduced forms without losing their nature. So I used the meta. Within each study, I have to say on category 1, for example, mode of accumulation. Which theory, for example, does the work of Ndwandwe on Cameroon, on the spirit of l'esprit d'entreprise au Cameroon, which metaphors is coming in Ndwandwe. I get those metaphors, Then I do a synthesis, which is one of the product on this category. I do a synthesis on mode of accumulation, for example, to say that on mode of accumulation, the collective findings from all the studies that I've integrated give this understanding. And that has a synthesis is described as a translation. It's a method of systematically comparing the metaphors. It's a method of systematically comparing the metaphors. It's a method of systematically comparing the metaphors across the studies. So the categories, so all of these are grounded. They don't come from any. Are we fine? Okay. All of these are grounded. They don't come from any outside work. They come from the studies themselves, from a process of systematic mining them, which can almost be equated to deconstructing the studies and reconstructing them around categories that you find relevant for your theory. So I do product 1 is produced, product 2 is produced, product 3, product 4. Then that is how the chapter itself is presented. The chapter basically consists of a reciprocal translation of the synthesis, which is presented. That on mode of accumulation. Ndwandwe says that in the Bamileke context, the process of accumulation starts through the individual entrepreneurs generating a sustainable income activity, no matter how small the source. Then participating in saving, rotating credit union. Then engaging into a homogamous marriage, what they call homogamous marriage. But in the case of the Gourage, this one says this. So that process of systematic comparison that illuminate understanding of the phenomenon and allow us to almost in a grounded manner build even new concept. So that's the first line of product in chapter 4. Then the second line of product is the line of argument itself, which is my theory. The line of argument is just a global interpretation of all of this. What does all of this lead to? Which interpretation can give us a common framework to understand this. For example, one of the in vivo concepts that is emerging in my case study of the Guraj from Ethiopia is that the author in that case study used the notion of social movement, entrepreneurship as social movement. Now, assuming one instant that I take that as the line of interpretation, it's very powerful. Entrepreneurship in perspective is unique because it directly gives a different perspective to entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship moves from an individual thing to a collective one. And the modes and the practice on how you go about promoting it becomes radically different. So that's the product that's produced. I wrote constructivism on the first line, and that is important because this thesis as constructivist is largely based on a constructivist type of approach on understanding, crossing, not just being discussed in the methodology chapter, but crossing systematically across the world. So, and it's in line with also the claims of meta-ethnography itself, that the product that you produce is nothing but just your own interpretation, but an interpretation that is grounded in the data that you're analyzing. So that's the product. Where am I? I'm here. I'm building this matrix. It takes time because I have to remind most of the meta-synthesis studies that I've seen are done by groups, 3-4 people. At one point in time, just the process of collecting the studies, at one point in time, I haven't actually took a research assistant before I realized that the time for supervising him was more than the time I could need to produce to go and search and research for the work myself. I asked UNISA at one point in time to search for me. The results were also disappointing, the UNISA library. So I have to do it myself, browsing through the academic electronic databases, calling in the countries, asking the local professors there, which studies is there a study on Kikuyu's entrepreneurship? I've been far enough, I've not seen any. Then I build that list. And then now the process, I'm systematically mining this inside the individual studies to be able to build this. At the same time, because grounded theory asks you to do several things at the same time. It's an iterative process. The memos on this, I'm daring already to write them, to formulate them, and articulate them. So it is a lengthy process, and it will take the time that it will take, but I'm quite convinced that the product that it will produce from it will be of high quality. Mm-hmm.
Right, can we please? No, it's soft.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry? Yes. So again, 10 minutes for questions, comments, and advice.
Let me get my book. Yes, the pen there. Yeah.
Well, first I want to congratulate you. I think it's very. First, I want to congratulate. I think it's quite an impressive, not only in terms of the material collected, but in terms of the sophistication of the methodological reflection. I do have a few suggestions. Mm-hmm. One is that I think that it may be a little confusing to say so much that you're doing a grounded theory. In the respect that it seems to me that you're doing sort of a revival of grounded theory, taking account of criticisms that have been made against it, mm-hmm. And you end up with the final statement that theory is not the truth; it's just my own interpretation. Mm-hmm. So I think you might sort of nuance that a little bit. Mm-hmm. Also, although it's true that one can make different interpretations, it's also true that one can make a fallibilist interpretation of interpretive method. And I think one of the people who's done that is Harold Garfinkel. And what I mean by that is, having made an interpretation, you can sort of ask yourself, well, how could my interpretation be wrong? Mm-hmm. What sort of test could I make that might show me that I have misinterpreted it? Mm-hmm. So you can't ever get to any final truth that's somehow something more than interpretation. Mm-hmm. But you can rule out interpretations with the kind of triangulation that seeks deliberately to test them. And I think Garfinkel's a good source for that. Mm-hmm. further, being a pluralist in economic matters, it seems to me that one thing that your study is not about, might be good, I think it's not about, and perhaps you might want to say it's not about. It's really not about the question whether entrepreneurship will solve all our problems. It seems to me that it is about the question, how do we encourage entrepreneurs? What are the factors that make entrepreneurs happen? Certainly a lot of confidence in the importance of entrepreneurship for development in Africa. But that's not the same thing as saying that if we only had more and more entrepreneurs, we would have all the economic forms we need to solve our problems. I think that human development pretty much implies that there's more than one way to more than one material practice that has to happen. I don't think you want to say that Say's law is true. I don't think that's an issue you're really dealing with. So I think you are dealing with the question how to get more and better entrepreneurship, but you're not dealing with the question, is that all we need?
Yeah. Just a quick reflection on that. On the first one, I think the other ones are directions for consideration. On the first one, my approach to grounded theory is Kati Shamas, and a formulation of constructivist grounded theory.
Yes, so yes, I suspect.
Yeah. So yes, that was
Okay. Right.
Sorry. We need you on the video.
Yeah, it is just a technical comment. Why did you submit to us a handwritten thesis?
Yeah, let me respond to that. Yes, the particularity of the method is that it grows across, and it's a bit difficult to effect closure before actual closure in any given point. For example, I just said that the chapter 2 is development as of now. The findings on the theory may tell me that I don't need to discuss that point at all, and that point will probably get out. That's why, under some pressure to submit, I had to kind of pull my memos, to use a grounded theory term, to put my memos together and forward to at least show some evidence to appease the supervisors that progress is happening, something is being written, because I thought they may lose hope that the product is advancing. So that was just a bit of a cunning way of saying it's coming.
Right.
Maybe I'll answer you in a different way. Your question. I remember a professor from Portugal said one of his greatest strength is his sense of humor. So the handwritten thesis was part of the sense of humor. My question is, as someone who is learning, I see your topic, and then your chapter 2, which is, your chapter 2 is supposed to be your literature review.
Yes.
And I've always thought your chapter 2 must be a reflective, all of this that you write about is related to your topic, your topic, and then your literature is kind of linked to those.
Yeah.
And I'm not seeing this here. And I was just wondering if you, yes, I know that you keep on changing it every now and again, but I think can you explain why there's no link? Because I think it's a very creative way of doing your literature review, the way you explained it, but I thought I'd see that sequence coming through.
I mean, I think the first thing is that the literature literature review is a literature review. So you have to review the literature on the phenomenon. You have to review the literature on the phenomenon that you are studying. And substantively, the phenomenon that I'm studying is entrepreneurship. The title, as I said, is a working title. By the time I coin my theory, then it will necessarily have an impact on, because the core concepts that that theory will be made of can inform the way you frame the title.
Right, I think we can now give him a round.
Comment. Oops. Lebs.
Right.
In fact, his approach is what I mentioned earlier. It is a circular approach. It is the approach Rutendo is using also. Is not a linear approach. If you approach this thesis in a linear way, you put pressure on him, because he's part of his co-creation, and he uses that co-creation into a co-analysis. It is so many things bundled into one. That is why sometimes I leave the students, because I want them to find their way before bringing their thesis to me. No, because I do not want to put pressure. But Zelezeck, what you have done in chapter 2 only could have been broken into 3 chapters, because the analysis in chapter 2 only, it could be a thesis on its own. So don't be stuck into going deeper and deeper and deeper. You know, you lose us. Approach your thesis, your theme, from the perspective of what you have said, but make the thesis not presentable but acceptable. It is just a PhD thesis. It is just a PhD thesis. You have thought so much. You can, in fact, you can narrate the thesis from beginning to end. Just do it and stop thinking so much. All
right, thank you. Right, you want to give a last thought? You want to say, are you finished? Oh, thank you very much.
I've finished.
Right. Bring. No. Yes. Stop thinking too much, the advice. And another Z, please. Another Z on the chair.
Yes, another Z.
I get this out.
Yeah, take it out and bend it and put it into the computer and send electronic version next time. I'll request Rutendo to remind you. You'll remind him to send, not a written.
Nearly collapsed.
What's wrong?
It is the
Yes. Okay.
Just check where I am, then listen, and then.
Right, you now have 20 minutes to
Yes.
present,
Yes.
and after that we'll have 10 minutes for interaction. Thanks. We are in your hands now, Ziphora.
Thank you very much. My topic, or the background of my topic, is on the international experiences of the integration of indigenous knowledge system in the curriculum. And which curriculum? The curriculum for basic education in the case of our country, South Africa, and the lessons that South Africa can learn for IK policy and practice. Because, as you know, there has been so much dilly-dallying and so much talk of success of the integration of IKS in the curriculum. But to date, if there's anything to show, I wonder if there'll really be anything to show. But this is a study. It's not just a question of saying there is nothing or there is. One has to really go and dig deeper and get into serious talks with mainstream scholars and other people who have been there before us, like the Netswera saying, which says "Tlhako ya morago e gata mo ya pele e gatileng teng." I'll ask Lebs or anybody who will capture some of the proverbs that I'll be using to interpret them in a way that will be meaningful, because we cannot interpret them directly, as one of the speakers asserted. I think it was you, Lebs. And then you will realize that in my introductory orientation, I will take a bold stance of saying this study takes at a time which is very much critical for the whole world and Africa in particular, whereby issues of values take center stage in the international arena in the face of globalization, which affects all indigenous knowledge systems, especially in as far as issues of human development and transformation in education is concerned. Well, in our country, South Africa, this process can be said to be unfolding within the context of the freedom that was attained, and then the development issues of transformation in education. As we all know, that it is a journey which has begun long before we are actually using transformation as a buzzword now. And there were stages, and like when we look at the lotus of the chair of SARChI, when we look at colonization, I remember when we started the first address of Professor Hoppers, when she was addressing us as a collective of students, that why she agreed to take on the directorship of this chair, and why she agreed to supervise us with all our topics, like Morongwa has mentioned. I remember Said also said the same thing one day, that when I listened to all the topics, we were just brainstorming all our topics, and Professor was there listening to them and seeing that all our topics actually, after the immersion process, some of us after 4 years or 3 years, you know, she was actually worried that it seems like we are just going in, you know, in different routes. And we were given an opportunity to voice our concerns, our frustrations, and all that. And that's when one of our colleagues, Said, who has graduated in Master's, said, I get the impression, the feeling that most of the topics of my South African fellows are more melancholic. Am I right? He said something like that. We are still stuck in moaning and complaining in a melancholic way. We are not prepared to transcend these binaries that our former education system has kept ourselves captive in. And it is as a result of all these talks that some of us who are maybe slow learners actually took long to understand that what is it that we actually wish to share with humanity. To me, this kind of a study, it's not just a study of achieving a PhD. That's not the reason why I'm not finishing. Bear with me. But it is the seriousness of the whole decision of having said, this is the study which I wish to embark on, so that when I'm gone, wherever I would have gone, I must have left something. More so that when I was doing my master's, I collected all these stories. I'll call them stories now, which at the end of the day, I asked myself this question: was it just for the sake of getting my master's certificate that I must get promotion or get a notch in my salary, that I went all out to go and collect this wealth of wisdom from these old people with such a wealth of wisdom? And I asked myself questions like, what is it that can be done with all this information? Because when I was talking to myself, there was so much that I gained as I was listening to all these old people, other than just stories whereby you were sitting in front of the fireplace and they were telling you stories that make you to sleep. And that was my major problem. I never knew that this would be something that can be embedded, that is embedded within our indigenous knowledge system. And it was only after so many processes of immersion in SARChI that I realized that, by the way, it seems like all those kind of stories that I was collecting can be differentiated into different pockets, which can really maybe make our education system or our curriculum relevant, because as it is now, it is irrelevant. Hence, this type of study and this type of caption that really made sense to me. And the problem, like I say, based on what I was saying, was actually the lack. I realized that there is a lack of a transformative intent that is relevant to the integration of this indigenous knowledge system or traditional knowledge system, however it is referred to elsewhere in the world, in the basic education. And this tendency of lack of serious intent, of the relativity of the integration of this indigenous knowledge system, has impacted negatively on the policy and practice of IKS in South Africa. We know that we've long been talking, ever since 1994, there has been talk of alternative kind of education. All different kinds of policies came, like Morongwa has indicated that for now we are talking CAPS, but CAPS, it's not a new curriculum. She can talk of NCS. That was my discovery as well. Now, that will also take me, if you can ask me what is going to be the structure of my study, it will be a structure of actually looking at the innovation of the curriculum in South Africa, from NCS to OBE and then CAPS, not from NCS to CAPS. And when you go back, that how has these curriculums evolved, and finding out there is this missing gap, there is this missing link, the African perspective. That is why you will find that most of our so-called good policies in South Africa are, in most cases, political symbolism of making people believe that something is happening because something new has been brought up into the arena of education, and it is being perceived as an alternative. That's why I said to you, I've got quite a number of snaps that will give you an indication of my methodology. My methodology is a desk one, where I'm sitting on the desk and searching the documents that how has other people. Lebs, can you explain that concept of the proverb? Tlaku ya morago e gata mo tlaku ya pele e gatileng.
I'm put in the spot. Right, I'm put in the spot. You know, a cow has 4 legs, ne? So when the first one goes, when the first one leaves, there was a mark. Then the next one goes into when it steps, it will step in the mark of the first one. So the followers always follow those who went before them. That's basically what it means.
Okay. Indigenous knowledge in schools, a success. This was a caption from a Business Day Alive article on one of our local magazines, whereby the minister then of the Department of Science and Technology made this bold statement that integrating the teaching of indigenous knowledge system into the basic education curriculum was already proving successful, with teachers reporting an improvement and in argumentation and high-level thinking skills amongst pupils. Deputy Minister also echoed the same words. You go on and on and on. But it was quite interesting that when it comes to the Minister of South African Revenue Services, he had this to say. On the 25th anniversary celebrations of a leading non-governmental organization of Kagiso Trust. Kagiso Trust is one of the financial machines or institutions that are pumping money for the transformation of education in South Africa since the dispensation of democracy. And our minister, finance minister then, I'm sorry, he was a finance minister then, Pravin Gordhan, he bemoaned, contrary to what the minister was ululating about, he bemoaned continued poor results. While 30% of the national budget was spent on education, he said the approach to transforming education in South Africa had to change as the investment made was not yielding returns. Organizations involved in education like Kagiso Trust is doing need to find a way to improve the outputs of the sector, as poor growth in education is a serious limitation to the growth of the economy. That's what he said. The question to the study: we can all hear the drive that it is about the economy. Based on what Lebs has explained, can now the international experiences of the integration of IKS in the curriculum for basic education impact positively on the policy and practice of indigenous knowledge in South Africa? Yes, we have heard the success stories. We have heard the contrary statements of the people who are in the economies, that what is said out there or what is it portrayed out there does not actually put South Africa in a upper level in as far as international benchmark is concerned. While so much money is being pumped, recently, I'm sure some of you who are involved in quantitative studies can tell us more in interpreting these statistics, that where is South Africa ranking? Number one, in as far as a country, in as far as the education nationally of the country is concerned. Where is South Africa ranking in as far as maths, physics and technology is concerned? In as far as literacy, what else, Morongwa? Maths, literacy, maths and science and other things. We are below even other countries in Africa, like Tanzania, you name them all in Western Africa. What is the problem? And when we look at those countries, what is actually happening? Hence I said, is it not time now that we can look at where other people have stepped and learn from their experiences? But because we are subjected to international benchmarks, we need to look at other indigenous others, that how have they traveled this road of taking this bull by its horn and really claiming what we purport to be our hope, the only hope that we have as a continent. And unless we really do that, there is no African Renaissance, unless we define the terms of our education system.
Thank you very much. It's soft, your clap is soft, ne? Okay. Right, time for guidance, questions, comments, the next 10 minutes. Come to the fore, please.
Oh, thank you.
Stand up.
No. No, oh, okay.
First I have a question, and then I have a proposal. But maybe it's an impossible proposal, but anyway, I propose it anyway. The question is, I remember a few years ago you said something that struck me, and I've never forgotten it. And I want to know if I understood correctly and if you still believe it. Because I remember that you said that in some communities the whole idea of language is inseparable from the role of the ancestors and the elders. You still believe that? Okay, good. I think that's a very important idea. Here's my proposal. I'll tell a little bit about my own last couple of years. I was on a committee to propose a reorientation for education in Chile, and I resigned. The reason I resigned was it seemed that all of the premises came from economics, so that you really couldn't do anything in education until you decided what the purpose of it was, and the purpose was always economic development in some form or other. So I said, look, we've got to rethink economics first before we can rethink education. So I started a new committee to rethink economics. So my proposal would be that if you want to think about, where is education going and why, choose an economic framework. Among there are lots of alternative economic proposals in the world, and see if you can say, well, where are we going in terms of economic development? And then once we know that, or maybe we're going to try to be anti-economic. Maybe we're going to have a society that does not have an economy. Or then once you do that, you're in a position to think about where education should be going. I think many of the complaints about education now are that this is not really education. It's not the transmission of culture. It's not the formation of human values. It's really doing whatever we think we have to do to be internationally competitive. Mm-hmm. But if you're not going to be internationally competitive, if that's not going to be your goal, you need some other economics to fill in the blank space.
Thank you very much, Prof, for your contribution. And like I say, I was just trying to avoid my being long-windedness. I remember on the 18th of September last year, we received a correspondence from Professor Richard, and Prof circulated, gave it to Rutendo to send it to us. And it was very much striking that as I was going through my documents, because one of my methodologies, my research design, it's document analysis, case studies, and meta-analysis. As I was struggling to get some of this information and the approach of other countries, indigenous communities, like the Canadas, New Zealand, and Australia, I have indicated, justified why those three in terms of their colonial past. I looked at the principles. It was the issues on the principles of survival. That in the time when the society has come into a cul-de-sac, when its education system has failed it, or everything that they have done has failed it in as far as the youth or the future of the learners is concerned, what can be viewed at that life, human life, it's not all about the economy. and I looked at this information that was circulated about the principles. I'm sorry, I didn't get the caption that where was it coming from. It was an article based on 3 principles. The needs of those who need to sell something, and those who don't want to sell something, and those who believe in selling something, and how they can survive. How can human survive in spite of all the market economies systems? And that really made a lot of sense. Yes, so I really agree, and I understand, I can relate to your proposal, and I've got that in front of me, and I'm going to include it. Thank you very much.
Right. You want to say something?
Ziphora, you have immersed for a very long time, eh?
Yes.
You know that. Don't you think we should get on with it?
Yes, we are.
Good.
We are. We are. This was just the skeleton. This was just the skeleton.
I was looking at your research question, and all of them talk about international experience. Well, the title also talks about international experience, but I would expect a certain question on identifying where the gap lies in South Africa level. Otherwise, without knowing, without giving much attention to what is happening here, if we try to bring some international experiences, they cannot be relevant sometimes, because we have to diagnose it first, what the problems are. So in the research questions, all of them talk about international experience, but where are they going to fit in? Unless and otherwise we identified where the gap lies. Or are you starting from a certain study that clearly shows the gap, or are you identifying the gap and then trying to fill that gap with the help of international experience? So I was expecting some 2 or 3 research questions that deal with what is happening in South Africa, in addition to the international experiences.
Thank you. Yes. My general research question, maybe I didn't applaud it enough to your capturing. It's on the international experiences of integration of IKS in the curriculum for basic education. Can those experiences impact positively on the policy and practice in South Africa? I indicated in my research, in my problem, yes, that the problem that I was battling about when I came to settle to propose for this thesis was the issue of the gap that amongst all the things that has been done in comparison with other countries in the continent, not even going outside, I found this common phenomena of the lack, the gap of the African worldview or perspective. And to me, that was the major problem of us not moving forward like that cow. And in reverse, if we look at other countries, the so-called First Nation countries, the New Zealand Maoris, where there are the majority of indigenous population, we looked at, in my desk research, I looked at their type of education system and their experiences, more or less, not exactly, because South Africa's situation is very much unique to them, but our experiences of colonization more or less drove most of these kind of communities to take certain approaches and strategies in bringing this missing link of their traditional indigenous knowledge system. Hence, I said in South Africa, we would go for indigenous knowledge systems. In other countries or elsewhere, we would talk traditional ecology education. So that, to me, that was a common phenomena amongst the indigenous communities. And the research questions, sub-research questions: how is the integration of indigenous knowledge system in the curriculum for basic education perceived internationally and in South Africa? What has been the experiences of those countries in as far as the integration of these traditional knowledge systems is concerned? And what lessons can South Africa learn from some of those experiences? And what value can international experiences of the integration of IKS in the curriculum have for human development and transformation of education in South Africa in particular?
Right, we are going to have the last comment, and we'll be then closing this part, and we'll start with the last two items on the agenda. Any last comment, last word, advice or question? Okay, in the absence of any comment, Ziphora, you had advice from the SARChI family, and so you'll be able to use the advice to continue with the work. Let's get on with it. Was the advice from Prof? Right, can we please give her a round of applause? Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay.
The next one, Prof will be leaving at 2:30. Fortunately, we managed to push the time. You are a very, very disciplined scholars, and now it's an opportunity for Prof to talk about general supervision and research-related matters before she leaves, and after that we'll ask Professor Hicks to do the same, and then we will then, in the way forward, have more dedicated time to discuss the way forward issues. Prof, please.
Thank you very much for attending this peer review meeting. I'm really touched by the presentation of Lebs and Kinfe, really, and all of you. I feel very humble when I come to these meetings, and I leave with a bit of confidence that we are making it. We are making it, despite the problems. We are making it. Yeah. We are making it not because we are graduating, but we are making it because we are pushing the boundaries. You get me? Each graduation means that the academic setting has accepted. You get me? In each of your topics, you push the boundaries. You get me? If I look at the total of your research themes, I think that I can be proud to say I had a very dynamic group of people. So be proud of yourselves. Now, the challenges. Zelezeck, please type your thing, and stop thinking. type your thing and read it and give it to me. And Ziphora, please get on with it. I'm very grateful for Philip Higgs here. He sits quiet, as if he doesn't exist. But he's in fact, I don't know how to describe him. He comes from a different, not culture especially, but a different frame of reference. He comes into SARChI to ensure that you all have thesis which can pass. You get me? Yeah. Which can pass. Yeah. So I forgive him for his insistence. I must meet the students now, or next week. Sometimes I've criticized him for putting duress, for putting duress on us as the SARChI family, because I don't like it. But he has understood it. But it is his prerogative to push you to graduate. You get me? It is his mandate here. But my mandate is to enlarge your cognition so that you push the boundaries of the academy itself. So, we are in a bit of tension here, but we understand each other. But please see him from time to time, and he will tell you exactly how you are doing. Yes, he's long been in the academy, and he knows the tricks of academic setups. So I hate him sometimes, and yet I can't do without him. Yes. But for example, if he comes here and he sees Ziphora not producing, and he sees Zelezeck harping on his thoughts, he gets worried. We must help them. But I tell him that we can't help them. They must help themselves. You get me? So, okay. Yes. Okay. That is all I have got to say. But for most of you, you are already in the final 20% of completing your thesis. So you get on with it. And for Ziphora, I think you are still in the 20% of starting. And Zelezeck, you are almost finished, but you must type it and you bring it to me. not the way you produce for Philip. I know that he put you under pressure. Yes. But I don't believe it that ever since you have not typed anything. You can't fool me, eh? People, for me, from me, that is all. Philip, you take the seat.
Stay just where I am,
Yeah,
Professor.
okay.
I'm short and sweet, Professor. I have nothing to add except to endorse all that you have said. You are the captain and you lead the ship, and we are proud of those who are sailing aboard it, dear, and of the captain we have. So they're doing exceedingly well. Listening to them this morning provided me with a great source of, what's the word I'm looking for? Silent admiration. And we look forward to the end result, which is there. It's there in sight. It's not far away. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Can we give the two professors a hand, please? It's not for professors. That hand, no. That's it. That's it. Okay. It's time for students. We will go just to make, before Prof leaves, we'll just go around each, just a quick one, and then we'll discuss way forward. We'll start Zelezeck, and Joy. We'll end up, yeah, just a quick reflection, then we'll end up with another set.
No, I think that at least the session was very, very fruitful. From a personal perspective, on my project, the key thing is, the key thing is, I kind of feel that in as much as I want to finish quick, I also want to craft the product that I like. And to me, really, I have to say this, I'm not so much interested in that paper as such. I'm more interested in the idea. And actually, I was sharing this feeling with Rutendo the other day. I feel I would have lost a lot personally if I finished this project a year ago. Because the process for me is self-learning. It expands my cognition. And that is something that for me, for quite some years, did not happen. Because in the early part of my 20s, I've read a lot. Pan-Africanism, Africology, and all the like. And I've kind of grown some kind of arrogance in learning, which I thought that there's not much to learn anymore. You say, I just kind of dismiss this idea as not relevant. It really don't. It's kind of from ideological perspective. And what this thesis has really done for me is that it has opened the possibility to learn again, because I've started challenging my own assumptions about what I knew, and being open to new ideas, and understanding that on the basis of that I can learn again, which I think is quite a reconforting feeling, because it gives you the sense that there's still something to discover. There's still something. If you write, for example, in this project, I've systematically resisted to use ideas that are familiar to me. For example, I was having a discussion with Professor X when he suggested Africology as the framework for the thesis. I said, no, I don't want it because I know it. I want to gauge something that I don't know. So in a way, short, just to say that the prolonged nature of the process itself is preparing me personally for something bigger. Come that paper when it comes, but the real thing that I take out of it is that self-building, is that expanding of my cognition. And it happens on a daily basis as I read on the project. And in a way, I'm even afraid of closing up the project. So I'll find a balance between the two to submit at some point. But from my own perspective, the learning must continue. The crafting must be as artistic as it can be, and lead to the project.
Oh, I'll stand. Okay. Thank you. My summary is, please push me. push me hard, question me. Because after I left USAID, I became a consultant. So you can imagine someone who already knows, has convinced some boards, is now trying to be academic. And I think this is something that we are slowly detoxing from my system with Professor Higgs, because I can say to him, but I've been a consultant. That makes it very difficult sometimes to write in an academic way. And so what I'm saying is that I'm open to questioning. Prof, hit hard on questioning, because what's going to come out of here is a reflection of you and your guidance. So it's very important that you hit hard in questioning us. It's a joint project for me. And at the same time, take into consideration that I don't have the luxury of youth of Rutendo and Zelezeck, that I can take the long road to freedom. I need to finish. I'm 50 years old. I need to finish because I need to get on with another program out there. So I think I have to balance those two worlds, right? These guys can go on. I admire what they're doing, but it's none of my business. So I have to choose between the straight and narrow and getting the certificate. I mean, I listen to how we work here, and everybody has to take a conscious decision about a comfortable methodology and a reasonable way of being the best you can be using both sides. Prof. Odora Hoppers this side and Professor Higgs this side, who keeps me in the straight and narrow. And I'm sure he knows very well that I don't have many years like Zelezeck. Thank you very much for the support.
Thank you. I just want to take off where she left. I'm also not Zelezeck and Rutendo's age. I'm old enough to be a grandmother, actually. I just want to say thank you very much. It's been, I was looking at the old drafts I've had, so many of them. And some of my earlier drafts, I was looking at them and I was like, what was I thinking? And and I'm sure even this one that I have, if I was to rewrite it next year, I'll still change it. But I'm really happy because I started in a very uncomfortable position where I was trying to fit this IKS into chemistry, which is my specialty, and physics. I was very, and then in one of the meetings, Professor Hopper said, no, just take science broadly. And then as I was taking science broadly, I eventually moved over to knowledge, and then realized that now these constructs are the things that have been making me uncomfortable because it was almost impossible for me to do it, and it's not happening in the curriculum. I just want to thank the patience of Professor Higgs. Professor Higgs, even when he wants to show you that what you are saying is very stupid, he puts it in such a diplomatic manner, and then you only realize after hours that this was actually this was a little bit of sarcasm. He'd go something like, and what do you plan to do with this, my dear? And then later you realize that. And I want to say, Professor Hoppers does not even tell you where to go. She shows you, and then you will choose your way. It's like you can really say, this is my work. What I call epistemic freedom. It's like you can, she's not really channeling you. The writings, her writings, I've come across them somewhat later. Actually, when I met Professor Hoppers many years ago, I did not even know she's written so many things. And I remember Professor Richards the other day said she must expose us to her writing. But by then I had already had a sizable collection. And also, like Professor Pete, what I realized is some of the things I tell her, and I think I'm this brilliant woman who's coming up with new ideas. And then I come across an article she wrote many years ago, and she was saying what I thought was new to her. But I've really grown from this experience. I understand myself better. I understand my colleagues better. What I would like to wish for us as SARChI is the investment that has gone into us should really go out into the world. It's just a lot of investment. we cannot hold on to it. We should share it in the world. We must influence the world. We must influence policy, starting from where we are working, and be the change that we really want to see in the world. And I'm really proud of our 2 graduates here.
Yes. Knife.
Kinfe, come.
Last word. What shall I say? Tell them. Cut them.
Don't forget that this will be the last time we see each other.
Yeah.
I mean,
As such,
Yeah.
as students of SARChI.
Thank you. When I joined SARChI before 4 years, I had a different title. It was on population dynamics and the attainment of Millennium Development Goals. And because I was dominated by the Malthusian point of view, and the Mphahlele, Professor Hoppers and others criticized that, and I started rethinking at that time. I was very much offended at the beginning because it was I spent a lot of time reading some relevant materials to that, but after I went back, I started doing again and again, and I became more satisfied. Now in every retreat that we had, I had the opportunity to present and get feedback from Professor Howard, Professor Luke and others, and at the end from Professor Higgs also. Now what I can say is, as I told you, I have a teaching experience of 26 years till now, after my first degree in mathematics. And then I am starting to do something useful to my university now, because the discussions that we had on 26th of April, it convinced everybody that we have to look at things not from the perspective of the Western, but also from our own perspective on what we mean by saying population, and just by starting from the existing reality. Now I am feeling that I am starting to learn, because till now most of the things that I was doing were just to attain degrees. Now it is to satisfy my inner self. And thank you very much everybody for the efforts that you exerted in transforming my inner self. And I am sure that well, I am influencing the other universities also, not only Mphahlele University. We have 32 government universities in Ethiopia, and I invited many people from all of them, and they were impressed with the situation, and I was talking to them the experiences that I got from SARChI. And as I said it in the morning, it's not only individual persons that are learning in this. From this we are having institutes and other form of centers and so on, and I am sure that the impact in the development of Africa, and as she said it, in the humanity in general, will be significant enough. Thank you. That's what I can say.
Okay. Yes, thanks. You say after the after.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Like most of the people have said that they have written and written, you'll be amazed that there's a room, there's an office right there at the back. Rutendo knows, she's got the keys. If you can go there, you will find, I don't know if it's a mini archive for SARChI of the evidence of the many topics that I have written and whatever, and I've left them there, and what I'm left with, it's only this few. So thank you very much for this chair, for having given me, for having really enlarged that space for me to say all my mind. I always say to myself, I'm an ageless Ziphora. That's why my name is Alphabet Z. You know, thank you very much, Prof. And for your patience, believe you me, I don't know if there can be anybody who would have been as patient as you have been until Professor Hicks came in, and I'm sure he must have asked you, what have you been doing with this woman who's not making any progress? Well, whatever the two of you discussed, I don't know, but I'm still here. But one thing which I would like to say, that, you know, today when I stand up and I say from my historical background, when I take my stance and say, I can read in my alphabet, I can read in my correct alphabet, I know exactly what I mean. What it is to say you can turn this Darwinian curse, we all know what it is all about, with its head, and really say, I am bringing back, I'm going towards that goalpost of bringing human agency into the center. I know exactly what I'm saying. I'm not just speculating, because of the time and that space that I have been given to learn these things. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay. Quick. Yes.
Okay. I'm just happy to sit in the background, but it's been very inspiring. Looking at the process today and going back to, say, 2010 when we had our first student meeting in February. And just seeing the evolutions that everybody has spoken about, just seeing those evolutions, which is basically, I think, that the root of that has been about owning and owning up. And as has been elucidated today, it's not just owning and owning up the research question, but owning and owning up yourselves. And it's about the self as an integral part of the research process, and the research process is an integral part of the self. And then I think moving on from Joy, what Joy has been trying to look at is how that brings up the concept of I am because we are. And having seen, as Joy brought up yesterday, what Professor Hoppers wrote, you know, more than 13 years ago, and how it is manifesting in each person's thesis. It's a real testament to that indigenous concept of I am because we are. And I just can only hope that we continue to be because of each as we grow, as the chair grows, and then it expands further, as Prof. Lidner has said, you know, to humanity as a whole. So yeah, that's just my piece.
Right. The chair, unfortunately, time has elapsed. That's why. Right, quick one. 3 things. Firstly is that when I started, my proposal was approved within 1 month. But after that, then I wrote the second proposal with Professor Odora Hoppers and Professor Richards. So this is the proposal that led to this thesis that I got a qualification for. Now I'm asking if I could pursue that other one. That is at UNISA. Because it's approved. I've got 2 approved proposals. But this one was for SARChI. That one was for me. So I'll